Hello again, KCIW listeners, and welcome to Curry Café. Every Sunday, producer and host Ray Gary puts together a panel of volunteers and guests to discuss various topics of interest to our community. For those that would like to participate in today's show with questions or comments, our text line is 541-661-4098. That's 541-661-4098. Now here's Ray to tell us about today's show.
Hi, this is Ray Gary again, and I'm going to tell you about today's show, surprisingly enough. But before we get started, I want everybody to realize that you don't have to fret. There are no DEI employees at KCIW. Don't have to worry about that.
No paid employees.
Today we have a very interesting program. We have two very interesting and knowledgeable guests. We're going to be talking about Martin Luther King primarily, so we can start.
And Black history and and a lot of other things as well. But anyway.
Do you want to say that now, probably? Who you are first?
Okay, who I am, and maybe I'll say a little about who Umi is, or Dr. Vaughan, our guest, because I've known him a long time. I'm Robert O'Sullivan. I used to teach high school in Oakland. I was an active participant in the civil rights movement back in the late 50s, early 60s, and I share one thing in common with Martin Luther King. Because of some leadership I did in a strange part of Indiana, the FBI started investigating me as a pre-ministerial student, and because of my leadership in such things. And I was, 22 or 21, somewhere around there, and which reminds us of how the FBI was and J. Edgar Hoover, a terrible opponent of the civil rights movement. Anyway, our guest today is someone I've known for a long time. I actually watched him not grow up across the street from me, but catty corner on the street from me. And his mother is a dance teacher who's had a wonderful program and a lot of other things. But one of many connections with that Umi, our Dr. Vaughan, our guest today, has, is he went to Morehouse College. And Morehouse College is where Martin Luther King did his undergraduate work at a very young age. And I wonder if a good place to start might be just talk a little about the King experience, Morehouse, the role of HBCUs, and so forth.
Sure. Bob, first of all, I really thank you for inviting me to this, this space to speak about my work and, contribute to the dialogue that you guys have going on. Morehouse College for me was a great and also interesting experience. I chose to go there instead of UC Berkeley, where I could have gone, or Stanford, where I could have gone, because I got a nice scholarship, and also because of the mystique of, Black excellence that, was known to come through there with people like Spike Lee, with people like Sam Jackson, and of course, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I originally was studying to become a veterinarian. Once we got to dissections and stuff,
Change your mind.
Couldn't hack it. I couldn't take it.
You couldn't hack hacking.
I couldn't do it. And so
you were going to be a bloodless veterinarian.
Yes, I turned in my white coat immediately.
You like to pet the cats, but you didn't want to cut them open.
That part. And so I immediately kind of changed over and started to study fine art, which had also been a passion of mine. And just on a funny note, the fine art department is really housed on Spelman's campus. So it allowed me a chance to be on Spelman, this all beautiful women's campus, while everybody else was getting kicked off. I was waving them goodbye on the way to class.
Oh, wow.
But Morehouse College was wonderful because the whole Black world comes through there. Ta-Nehisi Coates talks about Howard as a Mecca, and Morehouse would be its own kind of Mecca, or we can call it a Medina.
Yeah.
all of the black world there, people from Southern United States, of course, people from the West Indies, the Trinidadians controlled the computer lab, people from New York, people from Africa. And there was a great love for Californians somehow there too. So I had a great time. It was interesting though, because for my taste as a child of the civil rights movement and the Black Panthers, and the Black Panthers, it felt very conservative for me. So some of the, politics of the place, some of the stances that the administration would take, or the kind of positions and ways of other students really didn't match mine. So a lot of times my friendships would be off campus with, the Rastas in East Point or Decatur, rather than with the other students at Morehouse College. So I had a kind of intimate, but also, complex relationship with
kind of like
campus there.
Being a left-handed half Irishman in a Lutheran college.
Kind of like that. I can relate to Sam Jackson, who got kicked out of school for, armed resistance or taking over the administration building and that kind of a thing, right?
Tell us what you can about King's relationship there.
Dr. Martin Luther King's relationship himself there?
Yes.
Well, he was, of course, held up as the nation itself does, as an icon of freedom and justice, etc. And, to be frank, I think that sometimes as the college, participated in the status quo or the business ethic of the nation, sometimes, in my opinion, might have turned its back somewhat on the truest essence of his legacy in terms of really being against this plundering, extractive project that is the United States, So I think that even Morehouse College, as his alma mater and as a place that holds him up as an icon and idol, maybe struggles to all the time dig into the essence of what he wanted for our nation and our people, the African American people.
Yeah. One thing that interests me is Dr. Benjamin Mays, I think, had some knowledge of Gandhi and perhaps was the one who first introduced him to that. But then he went to a seminary in Pennsylvania where there was another Gandhi expert, and then Boston University. So, but kind of his intellectual history, I think, had something to do with Benjamin Mays.
Former president
yes.
of Morehouse.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I'm not an expert on that history.
Sure.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, it's Black History. Ray, I'm a little uncomfortable if you don't mind my asking a question or two.
Oh, please.
Okay. Bob, take it. Yeah, I mean, you two are the experts, so go ahead. Yes. If you see me doze off, just
yeah. Well,
I think you can tap on the glass here. I'll wake up.
Okay. Well, I'll talk about King, and I there are some fine books that are available on the civil rights movement and on King. A recent biography by Manning Eng and the classic Taylor Branch thing, and that helped me understand quite a bit about King. He was a talented son of a pastor and of a musician, and he thrived early on. I'm not quite sure the exact dates, but he finished high school at age 15 or 16. And although one experience during his high school years was very formative, and that is he went to and did well at a speech competition by bus. And on the way back on the bus, he and his teacher who went with him were both black. and they were told to move when some white people got on the bus. And he later said he never was more angry in his whole life than what that happened. Anyway, King went to Morehouse, and I think you were very right about some of the problems with Morehouse, but he then went to a seminary that was a Congregationalist, which now would be called United Church of Christ, in Pennsylvania, and there he was also introduced to, in more detail, to Gandhi by a professor there who was a student of Gandhi or had visited Gandhi. And then when he went to his graduate program at Boston University, a very important figure, Howard Thurman, was the chaplain of the dean of the chaplain of the church there, and had visited Gandhi in India and became the great mentor to King and a lot of other major civil rights figures after that. So that's part of that whole connection. Once he was finishing his doctorate, he could have been going to a lot of prestigious black churches across the nation, or could be the assistant pastor at his father's church in Atlanta, but chose to go to Montgomery, and the rest is history from there. When he'd only been there a year or so and was in his 20s still, he became the leader of the bus boycott, which, along with the U.S. Supreme Court decision, really got the civil rights movement going again.
I don't want to interrupt your.
Okay.
You mentioned being asked to move when white people got on the bus. I guess to us now that just seems like what? Yeah, Jackie Robinson, who was a captain in the Army, had the same experience on a bus on the base where he refused to move and got court-martialed, and eventually realized that the Army was not for him. But it just seems so foreign that things like that happened.
It's foreign and in some ways seems trivial. I mean, there were worse types of things happening to black people than just being told to move on a bus. But it was so. It has become the real great symbol, and rightfully so, of how wrong it is to treat people poorly and disrespectfully and without dignity for reasons that have to do with skin color or disability or sexual orientation. Those things are still going on, and but anyway, King's own experience of that, about Rosa Parks. People say, she was a simple seamstress and she was tired. Well, she wasn't a simple seamstress, and having been the son-in-law of an expert tailor who used to tailor for, among other people, Gorgeous George. Anyway, she was a longtime leader in the local NAACP, and one famous week there were 3 people who visited something called the Highlander Folks School in, I think it was Kentucky or Tennessee, I'm not sure. And those 3 people were Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, and Pete Seeger, whose "We Shall Overcome" became the kind of the hymn of the movement.
He didn't write that, did he? I think that's.
I'm not sure.
He was famous for singing it. I know.
Well, it was an older thing, but he kind of came up with his own version of it, I believe, but I'm not positive on that. But anyway, she was not just a, quote, simple seamstress.
The whole thing was kind of a setup, too, wasn't it? It was kind of planned beforehand.
There had been incidents earlier, including a year or 2 earlier, and they were looking for or planning or thinking about, but I don't know, what was planned, or if she was just tired or just didn't want to put up with this ridiculous thing.
It was planned. Absolutely, it was planned. Absolutely.
Okay, and even so, in those days, that took a tremendous amount of courage. Oh,
Umi, could you give a little of a background of the enslavement of Africans that affected not only the United States, but South America, Central America, the Caribbean islands, and that? And I doubt if most Americans have any idea how much of the slave trade. The biggest destination was Brazil, wasn't it?
Absolutely, and in all from the start of the 1500s through the end of the 1800s, as many as 12, 13 million Africans were trafficked from a large, swath of Western Africa, from what's modern day Senegal and Gambia, all the way down to Angola. Along that whole area, people were taken, and a relatively small percentage came to the United States, and a much larger percentage arrived in the Caribbean and most of all in Brazil. And, just like the United States, notions of beauty, kind of codes of accepted conduct and treatment of people based on their color was all conditioned by, hundreds of years of Portuguese in Brazil, Spaniards in Cuba, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, and Englishmen in Jamaica, Barbados, and what will become the United States, kind of building what will later become their nations on the stolen, uncompensated labor of these Africans, right? And just like we're seeing today with the policies of our current presidential administration, those kind of tendencies, those kind of beliefs, those primal urges are hard to leave in the past. And so I've written a book recently about Brazil and urgent humanitarian problem of African descendants who practice religions that come from those times, from those African descendants being attacked, basically terrorized. And it really mirrors and echoes the experiences that people of color are having in the United States now. The Civil Rights Act under attack, ICE in schools is mirroring situations of, African religious practitioners in Rio de Janeiro or Salvador, Brazil, being kidnapped or being stoned or their temple being bombed. And so what we're seeing is a kind of universal tribulation. And what I hope is that, in my favorite author, Walter Mosley's words, all of this will be part of the right mistake, a mess up, as it were, that ends up leading us to where we need to be as a world society, or, as nations, where we need to be in terms of freedom in the United States, where we need to be in terms of freedom and justice in Brazil. And my book, Silencing the Drum, Religious Racism and Afro-Brazilian Sacred Music, kind of takes us into that world of struggle.
I'm thinking of the last book that Martin Luther King wrote was Chaos or Community. And then that's the choice we're facing now.
Mm-hmm.
It's more dramatically than in any time in my lifetime.
The things that this guy is saying are unbelievable. He's way, way, way beyond dog whistles now. It's not, he's just coming right out and pretty much saying it, if you have this job because of an inclusion situation, then you're incompetent.
In my recent reading around and such, I have realized more than ever how much this enslavement trade enriched European countries, and all the finery related to just, ripping off gold, ripping off indigo, not indica, but and using free labor to get lots of sugar coming that way, and cloth, and both the economies of almost all the European countries and the economy of the United States was deeply enriched by ripping off black people.
One great book that I was exposed to is called Inheriting the Trade. It's by a white man by the name of Thomas de France, whose family was based in Rhode Island, and worked in, kind of building boats, building ropes, and metalwork to make chains. And they had a plantation that was associated with their family, I think, in Barbados. And he talked about the fact of, not owning slaves at all per se, but definitely being part of the kind of loop of wealth that existed that allowed, people to be enriched on the backs of Africans,
Yes.
Dr. Vaughan?
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Rick McNamer, volunteer here and monitoring the text line. So far, no text, but we do have a text line, 541-661-4098. I wanted to ask you about the mood. Ray touched on it real quick, but the mood of the country now. What has happened? Why such a regression, if you will, of honoring Black History Month or any other month that seems to be what this administration, they want to degrade?
Free and white and bigot, get your courage from a spigot. They've been in control all the years, and they're still around.
A couple of years ago on Veterans Day, I remember a politician say, how come the blacks get a whole month and the veterans only get one day?
So, well, there you go. Yeah, I mean, I'm 72, so I grew up, watching the beginning, I thought, of finally the Black Americans, if you will, trying to regain the freedoms that they either never had or lost. But now it seems to be that, again, some of the population is against that. And I just don't know why we regressed like that.
I think that anytime you don't fully deal with an issue and you let it kind of remain and fester, it kind of gains strength, And so in so many ways, again, I'm a kind of devotee of Walter Mosley. He talks about the fact that the battles that we're waging now is just rehashing the Civil War arguments. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so the very fact that, slave masters were remunerated for, lost property. The very fact that 40 acres and a mule, never was given. All those kind of things really allowed a kind of funk to fester in the soul of our nation. You know what I mean? And,
I'm sorry.
It said that, the Union won the war, but really culturally that the Confederacy won because, the spirit of the nation, as we have seen, whether Democrat or Republican, has allowed us to be where we are now, where all the things that we fought for are in danger, where, even in California, in the Bay Area, you can go somewhere and feel uncomfortable. You know what I mean? You could feel white people kind of just out of pocket, as we say, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kind of co-signed by the current leadership of the nation. And it's not right,
Yeah, I guess I assume that things would be better by now, but they're not. They're clearly not.
Yeah, they're just different.
Different and uglier.
It's certainly better, though.
And open and blatant.
I thought it was
if you make it today, if you make an appointment for a doctor that you haven't seen, and you get to the office and the doctor is black, you would think absolutely nothing of that. But when we were kids, you certainly would have thought, it was the doctor here.
And I've never been to the Deep South, but and I'm just going by some of the music. Even lately, it seems like the I've seen a rebirth of the Confederate flag flying in different places. The songs that I hear from groups that I used to like, well, I still like them, but the South is going to rise again. That's been around for quite a while. So, well, yeah, what you said about the Confederacy, it's still alive and well, it seems like to me.
And armed highly.
Very highly armed, that's correct.
I traveled a fair amount through the South, and I can remember growing up and hearing places like Little Rock and some of the other things that were constantly in the news for all the civil rights stuff, and I was actually reluctant to go there. I didn't think I would like going through some of those places, but I spent some time in Little Rock, and I'm sure it's hidden someplace, but it's not it's not the horrible place I expected it to be.
Dr. Vaughan, I know you're a musician and a dancer, and more recently a choreographer, although I think you have some congenital choreography in your bloodline. But can you generalize in the sense of your understanding of the African diaspora? This is a tricky question, but whether the way in which music and drumming and religion and curious other forms are at the heart of many diaspora societies and are not necessarily in the heart of everybody in other places and communities around the world. Just like to hear your thoughts on that.
One of the things that I discuss in this book, Silencing the Drum, Religious Racism and Afro-Brazilian Sacred Music, is that Black communities in Brazil are heirs to a long tradition of drums, call and response singing, and dance, forming a kind of triumvirate, a trifecta to make, beautiful things happen, to build communities, to foment well-being. At the same time, Europeans were introduced to certain kinds of drumming through the invasions of the Moors into Spain, for example, into the Iberian Peninsula. Among those Moorish soldiers, there were Africans from sub-Saharan Africa playing war rhythms. And so at the same time as African societies hold the drum, music, and dance as a kind of birthright, as a just everyday thing, our bread and butter, also Europeans kind of related it on a kind of DNA way back level as a war drum. And so there's this tendency to, whenever European colonial societies are wanting to put their foot down on the neck of workers, the slaves that they brought over, or their descendants that they want to control now, that the drum is the first thing that they want to attack.
Wow.
The role of the drum to bring people together, the role of the drum to heal, the role of the drum to access ancestors, the role of the drum to kind of guide and protect kind of religious philosophy, religious liturgy, family structure, all those kind of things, makes it, on one hand, highly valuable and at the same time highly dangerous. And so if you look, at, for example, the Stono Rebellion, 1739, South Carolina, it was a rebellion that brought white poor people together and enslaved Africans, and the drum was one of the things that called them together. In 1740, the year after, South Carolina was initiating all kind of laws to stop the creation of drums, building of drums, to stop the people coming together around drums. And you can see that same kind of thing happening in all colonial societies, whether you're talking about Cuba, whether you're talking about Barbados, whether you're talking about colonial Brazil. And so the situation that I'm talking about in contemporary Rio de Janeiro, Salvador Bahia, Maceió, etc., is kind of an extension of a centuries-long saga where the drum represents kind of life, and to strike against it is like to try and decimate a people. You know what I mean? It's really that simple.
It's interesting that some of the African religions that have made their way to Brazil and Cuba and other places are related to the Yoruba people of Nigeria. And in your book, in fact, I have it in front of me and open to it, a very interesting description of religion. And I think most people of Christian or Jewish or Northern intellectual perspective on things tend to think of, well, those are primitive religions. They're not to be taken seriously. And yet, when you give those descriptions here, there are things that are remarkably similar to some of the, quote, world's great religions. And you list them in your book. I don't want to read them. There are 10 of them, but I'll read a bit. Number one, there is one God who created and controls the universe and all that is contained therein. Two, there are selected forces of nature called, is it Orisha? Or, okay. And there are a couple other words that I don't even want to try, that deal with the affairs of humankind on earth and govern the universe. A person's spirit, number three, lives on after death and can reincarnate back into the world. Four, ancestral spirits have power over those. And many people in all sorts of different cultures are involved in those kind of beliefs. And part of why it's so important to combat what's going on in Brazil is there are ways in which good, positive religious instincts are being suppressed in many ways, many places.
Exactly. Like things that, everybody does are being kind of misconstrued and given a bad name. You know what I mean? Like, everybody likes to remember their grandmother, don't they? Everybody remembers grandma's apple pie. I mean, and that's all that's going on in the sense of like, we remember those who came before us and try and learn from what they mentioned in terms of how they live their lives and that kind of thing. And we make a big deal of it. It's important. Or the food we eat. Here's another one, animal sacrifice. There's been all kind of court cases. I would like to shout out my co-author, Dr. Danielle Boaz. She's a professor of history and I believe law at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. She has a beautiful book called Banning Black Gods and another book, newer still, called Voodoo, the ethno-history of a racial slur. And animal sacrifice is one thing that comes up as a legal sticking point oftentimes. But in these communities, just like halal meat is blessed in a certain way, just like kosher meat is blessed in a certain way, these African or African descendant communities are blessing the food. They're acknowledging that they're taking life in order to sustain life, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas in the United States, who doesn't eat chicken nuggets and where do the nuggets come from? You know what I mean? Who doesn't eat Whoppers and Big Macs and all of the inhumane farms and whatnot, all the wasted meat? You know what I mean? And so there's a lot of hypocrisy in this too,
Dr. Vaughan, this is Rick again. Robert mentioned the diaspora. Could you touch on that real quick? Not everybody might know what exactly that means, and I have a rough idea.
Sure. Diaspora is a term. It comes from a Greek word, I believe, that means like to spread. And so imagine like, a handful of seeds that you toss into the wind, and each seed ends up in a different location and is responsible for a new seedling. And the new seedlings all bear some resemblance to the original culture, but grow a little bit differently based on where they landed, the new nutrients, the new materials to work with. And so when we talk about the African diaspora, we talk about communities that might have started from Yoruba land, which is the western corner of modern-day Nigeria, but taken root in Rio de Janeiro or Salvador Bahia, Brazil, or taken root in Havana, Cuba, or taking root in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. And so there's cultures in each of those satellite locations that are similar, but also unique. And so that's the idea of diaspora. These communities across the globe that are related by cultural heritage, by genetic heritage, but that bear kind of original fruits, right?
Okay, thank you.
I wanted to say something I learned just yesterday. The word Caucasian. I see three Caucasians around me, and that always struck.
How dare you?
Struck me. Oh yeah, we're supposed to be colorblind. I'll the content of the character will come up next, but I just learned that this phrase developed to mean generally and generically white people, but because somehow some people got the idea that the people who came from that area were often very beautiful, the women. I mean, and I'm not sure what modern day countries are all involved in that, but it's a series of mountains above Turkey toward Russia, and it's supposed to be beautiful. But the funny thing is that although they were somehow thought to be the purest of white people, if there is such a thing, that actually the people who lived there came from Turkey, came from Israel, came from the other end of the Silk Road, somehow got into the Caucasus, and it really was a diaspora of many colors. And so anyway, it's such a stupid thing to be thought of as that, and white is a kind of strange description too. Close, somewhat pink is maybe a little closer, but
Well, that also makes black an odd term too, for the same reason.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Well, you talk about I wrote down something when I was reading a book a while back, the Manifest Destiny painting back in the mid 1800s. You talk about white. They had this white angelic woman leading the most white. I'll have to use that term.
White on.
European white on, white on, brother.
White off.
But anyway, leading the white Europeans across the continent, going west, and claiming that was God inspired or a divine wish.
He saved that land for us.
Well, exactly. And then at the same time, chasing away and being violent against the Native Americans.
Because those brown people didn't know what to do with
Well,
them.
again, and it seems like some of the racism is kind of ingrained.
Yeah, and some is based on I'm sure ignorance.
Lots of that.
I don't think in grade school I ever had the idea taught to me that America was kind of the most democratic, fair, developing country in the world, and we anti-imperialist. We were imperialist big time. Against Native Americans, against the ones that became our colonies after the Spanish-American War and the Mexican War. The Mexican War was favored by virtually every member of Congress except one. His name was Abraham Lincoln, and he was defeated in the next election. And the Philippines, there were terrible things that were done there by American forces, and who also thought of Filipinos as black people, and even used N-words regarding them. So,
and some very famous people who became famous were dealing with that stuff in the Philippines. I can't remember the name of the general who was kind of running the whole thing.
Well, I don't remember either. But Mark Twain was one of few people who fought against that growing imperialism, and there were other intellectual figures who had too, but most just it was a good thing. We're expanding. We're more places. Talk about extraction and money kind of things in your understanding of the relationship between European and North American and Africa?
There's a great book by Walter Rodney, a Guyanese scholar, called "How Europe Underdeveloped Africa." And we have all these terms like the third world and developing nations that make it seem natural that that the Congo is poverty stricken, or that Haiti is poverty stricken, and that kind of hide the fact that the economy set up during the colonial era in these nations were precisely to funnel resources, to funnel earnings and money from Africa to Europe, from Caribbean to Europe, and at the same time set up those colonial places so that they would be hard pressed to flip their economy or rearrange it so that it was beneficial to the colonial place or the colonized people, And so the situation of extraction, taking without giving, and giving being like, well, let's set up an infrastructure to, create jobs for your people here, or let's set up an industry for things that you guys need here, not just sugar cane to send to Europe, not just
rum,
or not just cocoa yam to send to Europe, all those kind of things.
Gold.
So those are kind of the bare bones, the skeletons of extraction. You can see the weak points of all the Caribbean nations. The fact that all of them are, for the most part, if there's not oil there, reliant solely on tourism. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
These are the evidence of extraction, right? Over centuries.
I can think of some European churches I saw that were entirely gold.
Yeah.
When you looked around, it was just gold all over.
I need to interrupt here quickly to a quick station break. You're listening to Curry Café on KCIW 100.7 on
LP.
LP. Okay, now that I've done that correctly, I'll see if I can squeak out the phone number here in case you want to text us and join in this conversation. Make a comment, ask a question, do whatever. The number is 541-661-4098.
Thank you for encouraging textual intercourse.
Again. And we can say that.
We hear all the time about the great founding fathers and how wonderful it was that we developed all this land that God left for us. And I have a saying that I think I made up, that this country was founded on slavery, manifest destiny, and genocide. All three of those things is
you can argue about the order of them, but all three is pretty basic.
Every time I say it, I probably say it differently, but it was all those things. Right up to John Wayne. He used to complain that he didn't understand why those Indians that weren't doing anything with that land wouldn't just give it to us. And
speaking of Johns, you mentioned John Wayne. Another John that's been on my mind recently has been John Brown.
Yeah,
I've been like
moldering on the grave.
Yes, I've been calling out. He led the revolt at Harper's Ferry on the eve of the Civil War. Right, a white man who wasn't going to stand for the status quo. And I'm wondering, where are the John Browns of today? Where are his children? Where are his descendants? What say you guys about that? In terms of, we know that like black people are profiled, are the first to be COINTELPRO'd or kind of broken down when they stand up. What about white people kind of stepping to the front now as the tone of our nation shifts, to a more fascist, a Nazi-ish kind of a situation, what is the responsibility of white folks to kind of?
I don't think we exactly want John Brown, though. John Brown, on his way to taking over that fort, and his gang or his children, I think mostly his children, just killed some slave owners, just out and out murdered them on his ways.
I'm responding some to what you just asked. I've been a Caucasian out of step with many of my fellow Caucasians much of my life, and sometimes and it happens in different ways. But I always thought that if people of different races and cultures and that just worked together, went to school together, played together, rooted together, and all that they'd get to know each other better and treat each other better.
It was a theory.
It was a theory, and it didn't work. Well, it didn't work in the relationship to the fact that in the United States there are so many guns, and there's so much people with money that is extracted or inherited, and there are things in the whole system and there are some white folk who understand and in their own way try to do things, but I
hope try to get elected.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I just hope that some emerge, but I keep trying to do my things to make things a little more loving and caring and community building, because chaos is awful.
Yes, it is.
And chaos is the opposite of the kind of music of the spheres. That includes drumming and other forms of singing and dancing and things that affirm life and build communities. We were not created, I don't think, to be alone. We were created for community, and chaos is an ugly choice otherwise.
You know, I wrote down a few notes as being a child of the 50s and 60s, and I can remember, and this includes, sadly to say, family and friends, a lot of some subtle racism and not so subtle racism. Mm-hmm. And but the older I got into the late 60s and 70s, I noticed a big change, especially around that I tried to be. I didn't want to be around people like that anymore. Mm-hmm. But Dr. Vaughan, like you were saying, yeah, maybe we do need a lot more, quote, white leaders to come out.
Yeah.
To come out a little stronger these days.
Yes, sir. Yes,
battle.
Thank you for saying that.
Well, and to battle what the heck's going on right now, and it's out and out racism coming back. Patriotism has turned into jingoism, as far as I'm concerned, on that side. So,
or patriotism, as we say sometimes.
Well, now that's a good.
That's very good. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, that's a good one. So anyway, yeah, and right now I think we're up against it. I hope this crazy thing ends soon, but these are tough times right now.
Yes, sir.
I'm not even a little bit optimistic that it's going to end soon, or at all. I think we're.
But one thing about
slippery slope, isn't that what they call it?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess so.
One thing about now, and it's crazy, but there are ways that individuals can communicate that just didn't exist 20 years ago, and
but that's working for both sides.
Yeah, but if the good Caucasians, what do you call them? Caucasoids. I just invented a new word, Caucasoid.
Okay, we'll take.
Well, this is a red letter day then for
Caucasoids. Screw the Caucasoids. Well, let's move on.
Well, so I got another question along those lines, Dr. Vaughan. How big of an influence do you think social media is, positively, negatively? Well, it goes all over the place. I think it's pretty crazy out there myself, but do you have any words on that?
You know, I'm up that generation that, you know, I was a grown man before I had a cell phone ever, you know what I mean? So yeah. I'm I know both sides of it, and I think that there's wonders that you can work. You can kind of reach the whole other side of the world literally in seconds with a beautiful idea and get feedback and have a dialogue about it. And then at the same time, have your self-esteem questioned and be pressured to buy some stuff. You know what I mean?
You mentioned beautiful idea, but it seems like the nasty, ugly ideas take traction.
Right.
Get traction quicker. You know what
Right.
it was Mark Twain said about a lie travels around the world.
Yep.
One thing that I'll add is that a gentleman by the name of Carlinhos Brown, he's a music icon in Brazil. He's somewhere between Stevie Wonder and Sting. He's the one of the judges on The Voice of Brazil. And he honored myself and my co-author by writing the foreword for our book, Silencing the Drum, Religious Racism and Afro-Brazilian Sacred Music. And he's a master in terms of using social media to bring people together around the drum, around the positive idea, around a notion that we have that's called ashe. And you guys say that, ashe?
Mm-hmm.
Ashe means the power to make things happen. It's like chi, or the life force. And Carlinhos Brown wrote the foreword for our book, and he's a master of using the drum to bring ashe, to bring people together. And that's what we're hoping to do with this book, to intervene in situations in Brazil, but also to even provoke the John Browns here in the United States, to all of us, to help in the situation that we're in.
I understand that each September there's a gathering on Copacabana Beach to support the Afro-Brazilian church, or I shouldn't say churches, but I'm not sure what I should say, religious communities that are being persecuted. And you should lead a tour.
I'm very interested in doing so. We're on the eve of Carnival in Brazil. This year is going from February 28th to March 5th. Today, February 2nd, in Salvador, Bahia, they have a big celebration for Yemaya, the spirit of the ocean, the mother of all. And in October, Bob, they have a march around the country. They do a march where people wear white and take to the streets against religious intolerance. So Brazil is great for having a calendar of celebrations, secular and sacred celebrations of all kinds around Yoruba, Brazilian Yoruba themes, Brazilian Congo themes, etc. So we could look at a calendar and definitely set something up. Take this radio show on the road, guys.
Well, actually, Dr. Vaughan led a tour that I was part of, and my wife, to Cuba, and it was extremely well run. And
awesome.
And anyway,
being a car guy, I would love to go there.
And I'm intrigued when I've been talking about this interview coming up at how multifaceted your life is. Not just professor and not just director until recently of Africana studies, but also a dancer and promoter and drummer and a choreographer and photographer. And anyway, I'm just delighted to know you, and thank you for showing so much excellence in so many different things.
Bob, I really appreciate, again, you're bringing me into this conversation with these other great souls that I had a chance to share some time with today. It's great, and these are the kind of conversations that are going to lead us out of this, you guys.
Okay.
So thank you.
Did a text?
I see the eyes on one of our operators is starting to glow. Maybe we have a text coming in.
Yes, we do have a text running out of time, but here we go. It says, pre-Atlantic slave trade, slavery existed throughout the world and within every race. Early white settlers enslaved Native Americans and whites, and not only as indentured servants, etc., etc. I wonder if the scale of any other enslavement could approach the disgusting system set up in America. But I think we must examine and question why slavery is so prevalent with our flawed species.
I think South Africa may have actually been worse than us. We brought people here and made them slaves. In South Africa, Europeans went there and made people slaves on their own land.
Yeah.
One of the main things that marks the difference is the difficulty or impossibility of shaking off the slave status in the situation we created here in the Americas. In the slavery of West Africa, in the slavery of China, or even among the Native Americans here, it was possible to no longer be a slave and to have no stigma about it. But as you see here, I was never a slave per se, but still in certain circles, I can be seen as such here in these United States.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So the stickiness and the kind of permanence of it is one of the main differences that make it so bad. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Here, and we're still dealing with it.
Yeah. Slavery, I think the texter, it was, what do you call them? Text cheat? No, we're the text cheat. Was accurate in saying it's existed all over the world in every society in one form or another.
Yes.
And they're looking back to Roman days. There were a third of the population. I'm not sure exact all that, but it was really, really awful, and it was awful in other places. But somehow the extent and the numbers involved in the trade just was an escalation, exponential. So many were involved, and the riches of so many parts of Europe were based on that very, very ugly trade. And there was never anything comparable to that I'm aware of otherwise.
So the centrality of the economy on that is another aspect that's different. You know what I mean?
And generational wealth doesn't happen even 10 generations after. If people, don't get the money and the jobs and the rights to save and all of the things that a lot of Caucasoids get for free. They just inherited from their grandmother, grandfather, what have you. And that's part of the injustice and part of the housing crisis and part of the food crisis and part of all other crises in this country.
Dr. Vaughan, Rick again, I just want to thank you again. Boy, what a great opportunity to hear your story and meet you, even though it's via phone, but that's okay. And we're almost out of time, so I just want to know if anybody has any, especially you, Dr. Vaughan, any last-minute suggestions or ideas.
I invite you guys to follow me on Instagram, UMIVAUGHAN, Umi Vaughan. Check out my book, Silencing the Drum, Religious Racism and Afro-Brazilian Sacred Music. You can read the book for free online. You can listen to an album of sacred drum rhythms and songs featuring myself along with drummers from a famous Brazilian group called Ile Aye, all for free online. Or you can, lend your support by purchasing the book. There's some beautiful art on the cover. And just let's continue this conversation.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a request. Will you affirm the fact that I had a hell of a good sinister hook shot and was rightfully known as the Kareem of the 6'2" crop?
The hook shot and the name Silky is all legit. East Oaktown bound. You know what I mean?
So it wasn't just braggadocio, however you say it.
He's hanging over to the left. Don't worry about it. You know what I mean?
And if they guard me too much to the left, a little behind the back dribble or pass. So no more of that dribble.
Okay, we're down to the last minute now, and I would like to thank you very much, Dr. Vaughan, for coming on and widening our scope a little bit. We live in a little tiny town like this. New ideas don't come up very often.
Thank you, Dr. Vaughan.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, until next time.
Okay.
Okay.
And you're listening to KCIW LP, beautiful Brookings, Oregon. Signing off. See you next week.